Franklin Roosevelt's first 100 days saw the Congress and the presidency working in tandem, crafting and passing into law important legislation in defense of the American people from the horrors of depression. Today, led by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, this 111th Congress of the United States is a logjam, and if we want to clear that logjam, we must remove the dead wood, starting with Nancy Pelosi. Banks are failing. Millions of Americans are facing the foreclosure nightmare. Unemployment is soaring. In short, our economy is breaking down. The inaction of our congressional leaders ought to be paradoxical to any thinking citizen. We've just had a new presidency voted in, a presidency whose party has the majority in both houses of Congress. So what gives? It would do well to remember that the 110th Congress was elected with a mandate of the people to go after then Vice President Dick Cheney. The Democratic Party won a majority in both houses, with many Republicans voting Democrat for the first time in protest of the Cheney-Bush administration. These incoming Democrats were blocked by the leadership of Nancy Pelosi. In 2007, Lyndon LaRouche introduced the Homeowner and Bank Protection Act, draft legislation to provide a firewall of protection for the American people from the impending collapse of the banking system, a collapse which we are seeing unfold today. Since being crafted, this draft legislation created a flurry of action around the country, with many state legislative bodies, city councils, and county councils passing it in the form of resolutions. This legislation is still of utmost importance today, as being the only solution on the table to deal with the continued breakdown of our financial system. Put it into bankruptcy, protect the people, and protect the legitimate functions of banking that are required to run a civilized society. Counterpose this to the fruits of the Hope for Homeowners policy of Representatives Pelosi and Frank, Senator Dodd, and then President Bush. Out of 2.5 million of Americans facing some part of the foreclosure process, they aimed at helping only 400,000. They had nearly 350 homeowners successfully able to apply for aid, and of these, 25 were able to renegotiate. Out of some 2.5 million in need of help, 25 received that help. And the whole time, a real workable solution with popular support was and still is on the table, LaRouche's Homeowner and Bank Protection Act. This act was willfully blocked by the same pothead Pelosi who has been pushing for drug decriminalization from her post as Speaker of the House. In spite of the overwhelming support for the HBPA from all levels of leadership on a bipartisan basis throughout the country. At one point, the text of the act was even read into the congressional record by Representative John Conyers of Michigan. LaRouche has called for a congressional inquiry without interference from either Pelosi or Frank, and a real investigation would find out who these two really work for. And it ain't the American people. These guys have been working for Felix Rohatyn and George Soros. The Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives has been working on behalf of empire, and it's time for her to go. Yesterday's comments from Senator Richard Shelby of Alabama at the opening of a Senate Banking Committee hearing, where he referred to the Senate's tradition of being responsible in a time of crisis, and cited the Pecora Commission as an example of this responsibility, is a step in the right direction. At the same time, Representative Cooper of Tennessee is circulating a letter which has the support of some 60 fellow representatives, calling for Nancy Pelosi to let the legislators legislate. All of the legislation passing through the House has been written by one or two congressmen. This includes the rewrite of President Obama's stimulus legislation, where billions of dollars worth of needed infrastructure projects were taken out of the bill. In fact, one of the people involved in writing Representative Frank's legislation is the same Amity Schlees who is a known neocon, an anti-FDR figure. There is precedent for getting Pelosi out of there. In 1998, Speaker of the House Newton Leroy Gingrich was forced to resign. Majority Leader Tom DeLay was forced out of Congress under a Republican presidency. The willful sabotage of the Congress's ability to act in this time of crisis is plenty of reason to force Pelosi and her accomplices out of our nation's capital. and this sabotage will naturally come to the surface as a result of an honest investigation into what brought us to this point of economic collapse. It's not too late to implement LaRouche's Homeowner and Bank Protection Act. In fact, because it was suppressed by the congressional leadership, the resulting crisis, which the HBPA would have prevented, requires the passing of this act all the more. Instead of bankruptcy, Pelosi and Frank pushed to bail out their Tory friends on Wall Street at the expense of the American people.